too bad. All right, so welcome to chapter 1, concepts of biology. This is just intro biology. This chapter is going to be what is biology, why do we study it, the works. So our learning objectives are to identify and describe the properties of life. Our goal here in this 1.1 will be to describe the levels of organization among living and non-living things. As well as to list some of the different subdisciplines in biology. There's a lot of subdisciplines in biology, and we will talk about a few of them. Okay. So what is biology? Biology is everything, kinda. But actually, biology is the study of life. This first root, bio, means life. And ology, when you see that O-L-O-G-Y, that just means the study of. So how do we define what is living and what is not living? Seems like a pretty simple way to think about it, right? But is fire a living thing? No. Is a rock? No. Why? Yeah, I got you there, didn't I? Okay, I'll tell you why. Look, it's the earth. This is what the figure says. Don't worry about that. What are the properties of life? The properties of life, the things that make something living. Order. There has to be order to it, and we will talk a little bit about that order in a minute. Energies. Energy. Use. It must have some ability to respond to stimuli, to feel something and respond to it. So, respond. What else? It must be able to adapt. Reproduce. It must be able to reproduce. Maybe not must, but must have the capacity or ability to possibly reproduce. What else? Environment. What about its environment? I like what you said, but explain it a little. The ability to not only adapt to a change, but to evolve and make yourself or your offspring more capable of handling the new environment. Yeah. So ability to evolve. And then the very last one is homeostasis. What is homeostasis? Yeah, homeostasis is the ability to balance / equilibrium, right? So when it's super, super hot outside, your body starts to sweat so that you can release some of that, some of your fluid, and that water will then evaporate, which will cool down your temperature overall. That's how your body adapts to the heat and then maintains homeostasis by cooling you down. From that, you will also lose a bunch of salt, a bunch of different electrolytes and things like that. So if you're outside for too long and you come back inside and you're dizzy and you're not feeling very well, all of that is your body saying, hey, I need something to get back to my baseline. I'm okay. Okay? So all of these things make up the properties of life. Make things are what we as biologists use to define life. I'm just going to talk about those a little bit more. Ignore all that. Okay? So think about this for a second. Why is this toad considered alive? If you go up and poke this toad, he's going to let you know that he doesn't like that. Yeah. Right? He's going to either jump away or flinch or move his body in some kind of way, right? So he is responsive to stimuli. What else does he do?
He has an organism.
He has organisms that allow him to do what?
To have functions in the body to survive.
Yeah, he has all kinds of bodily functions, stuff like that. But plants are alive. Plants don't really have organs, do they? They do. They do. They do. Plants definitely have organs, and we're going to talk about plant organs soon. Okay, but so having all of these systems that maintain homeostasis are something that would keep him alive. He can reproduce. He can make a whole bunch of little toad babies if he really wanted to. All kinds of stuff. Okay. This fire is not alive because it can't really reproduce. I mean, it can, but not without intervention, right? You'd have to pick up a log that's on fire and throw it with a bunch of other logs that are on fire. It'd have to move on the wind or something like that, okay? Fire can't, it doesn't maintain homeostasis. It doesn't adapt. Fire just is, okay? They do share some characteristics, like fire is able to use energy. It is energy, it uses energy, but fire is not alive. So let's talk a little bit about some of those characteristics. So the first one that we mentioned was order. All multicellular organisms, so everything that is living, will be made up of several things. The first one is atoms. Atoms are the teeny tiniest building block unit of chemistry. They are the base of the base. Atoms are made up of proton, neutron, and electrons. And they sit in a little cloud and they have a grand old time. If you've taken chemistry, don't judge my model. I know it's not right, okay? Let me live. Thank you. The next thing that they have is molecules. Molecules are made up of a bunch of different atoms. From those molecules, we get cells. Cells are a bunch of molecules that are pushed together and work together to execute a function. Those cells will then form into tissues, those tissues into organs, those organs into organ systems, and those organ systems will make up a whole organism. Oops. Etc., etc. Okay? Sensitivity, response to stimuli. Some plants, when you touch them, they will curl back in and try to hide. Snails do that a lot too. Lots of like bugs, if you touch them, they'll just kind of curl back in on themselves. That's what we mean by that response to stimuli. Like, for example, humans, if I were to, this is full, that's fuller than I thought it would be. If I were to make that loud noise, all of you, if you weren't paying attention, turn your heads kind of automatically. Your brain just does that without you thinking about it. Okay? So that's that response to stimuli that I'm talking about. Reproduction, you can make more of you. Bacteria can reproduce either asexually or sexually. And those are the two main types of reproduction that we talk about, asexual and sexual reproduction. Adaptation. Adaptation refers to the ability to live in environments that would be generally unlivable. So this image that we see here, this is a hot spring. You would think that nothing lives in this hot spring. These hot springs can get up to probably over 200 degrees Celsius.
Wow.
So they're hot. They're stupid hot, okay? But there are things that live in these hot springs. There's bacteria that live in here. Yes, they have adapted to be able to live in those temperatures. They are called thermophiles. They are a specific type of bacteria that can function in in temperatures that are super, super high. One of them, for example, is Taq polymerase. Taq polymerase. And Taq polymerase is an enzyme that we will talk about a lot when we get into DNA and into the genome and PCR, stuff like that. Okay? It's actually one that we will use, and its optimal functioning temperature is 172 degrees Celsius. That's its optimal temperature. For reference, a human body is generally around 36 degrees Celsius. So that's crazy, crazy hot. So to be able to adapt to your environment, to be able to survive in something like a hot spring is a vital part of life. I mean, heck, I grew up in Arizona. Arizona's not supposed to exist. It's the sun, right? We, as humans, have adapted to be able to live in environments that otherwise should not be inhabitable. Okay? Growth and development. I think this is one of the ones that I forgot to write on our list, but growth and development, the ability to grow, the ability to start as a small and end up as a big. Start small and big. Right? We grow, we get older, we get larger, we develop more muscles and whatever it is that makes us grow. Okay? And then homeostasis. Again, homeostasis is just the ability to maintain balance. Producing energy, we have to be able to do things. In order to be a living thing, you must do things. And in order to do things, you must have energy. Energy production, either internal or via another process, is vital to life. Yeah. You got to do stuff. You got to find energy somewhere. And either you're going to make it or the sun's going to make it. Well, the sun's going to. We'll talk about photosynthesis when we get there. Don't worry about it. Photosynthesis is a process. Oh, it's a process. And then the ability to evolve, the ability to change over time. All of these were all once a very similar thing, right? These are all in the same pepper type family, or like berry type family. Yeah, actually, these are all berries. These are all berries. Yeah.
The first ones are bell peppers.
Yeah, bell peppers are berries.
What? Okay.
Oh yeah, these are all fruits. More or less. Except for maybe not these carrots. Carrots are a root, but that's a different thing. Okay? But they all started as something very similar, and then as they have moved space geologically, as they have gone through different weather things ecologically, they have evolved to be different. Okay? And then again, those levels of organizations. We talked about those. Atoms are the base unit of matter. Everything in this world that is matter is made up of atoms. Oops. Everything that matters is atoms. Okay? All matter is made up of atoms. There is something else that we think about when we think about matter, and that is energy. Energy is not made of atoms. Energy is a wave. That's physics. Don't ask me about that.
Okay, just my brain is like this.
That's physics. Energy is a wave. Light isn't real. Sound is a concept. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Sound is a concept. Sound is also just waves. So everything is waves. Anyways, yeah. Okay. So molecules are just large groups of atoms working together. Does anyone have an example of a molecule? What was that? You were right. You're right. Carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is a molecule. Water is a molecule. Sugar is a molecule. Iron is an element. C6H12O6. Iron is an element. Different. An element is a group of atoms that cannot be broken down any further, right? So your elements are going to be like the things that you see on the periodic table: hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon. I could go on, right? Those are elements. When you mix those elements together, you get molecules. Those elements, that's just a little side piece here. Elements are made up of atoms, of one specific, maybe not one specific type of atom, but elements are made up of atoms. For example, hydrogen. Hydrogen has 2 protons and 2 neutrons in its core, and then also has a couple of electrons, 2 valence electrons on its outer shell. I know I'm getting into chemistry. Bear with me here. It will make sense soon. This would indicate 1 atom of hydrogen. Carbon, for example, has 6 protons and 6 neutrons. So it has and it has whatever in its valence shell. This would indicate 1 atom of carbon. So a bunch of atoms of carbon put together would give me like a rock of carbon, or with enough pressure, eventually a diamond. Does that make sense? It's all just atoms until we can't split it anymore. Then they're elements. You with me? Cool. Okay. Those atoms will make molecules. Those molecules will make macromolecules, and those macromolecules will help us make cells. Cells are the basic unit of biology. Atoms were the basic unit of all matter. Cells are the basic unit of biology. No, of course. Atoms are the basic unit of all matter. And cells are the basic unit of biology. All living things are made out of cells, and we will talk about the basic going-ons of the cells. We'll talk like organelles and things like that in the next chapter here. There are two types of cells that we talk about. One of them is prokaryotes. The other are eukaryotes. Which one do you think humans have? Eukaryotes. They're complicated. We're complicated. Okay? A eukaryotic cell has things like a nucleus. It has mitochondria, which is what? Yeah, that says Mitch. That's not what I wanted. Mitochondria. It has all kinds of organelles and a whole bunch of other stuff. They are complicated. You can also kind of think of them as animal cells. And prokaryotic cells, you're going to find those more in bacteria, in protists. Some protists might have some prokaryotic cells. They're pretty small. Still do quite a bit of work, but are significantly smaller than a eukaryotic cell. Okay. The differences in these types of cells, the differences in all of these things, all help to inform the diversity of life. Life is broad. I'm not going to say no two things will look exactly the same because twins exist, right? Twins can look exactly the same. But all kinds of things will look different. Like my two cats, they both look super different from each other. All kinds of stuff. One plant versus another plant, all informed to the diversity of life. It's crazy. All of that life has to be able to be organized, though. And that's where we as biologists have come in with a classification system loved and known as taxonomy. Taxonomy is a hierarchy that allows us to break down anything into smaller pieces, right? The first thing that we talk about is the domain. The domain eukarya, that's mostly that's anything that is a eukaryote. Anything that has eukaryotic cells, that's going to be in the domain of eukarya. There's eukarya, there's archaea, there's protists, there's all kinds of stuff, okay? So we've got domain, then we go further down into kingdom. There's all kinds of different kingdoms. Specifically for like a dog, it would be kingdom Animalia. Then we go phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Don't worry about all of that right now. It will come down the pike later. This is like a chapter 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 problem. Okay? Just know that when we are talking about classifying anything in biology, we are using a little bit of this taxonomic hierarchy. Okay? Cool? Cool. Again, these are all things that would belong in different domains. This would be bacteria. This is an archaea, plantae, animalia. Those are 4 different domains, and all 4 of these things would be in different domains. Just kidding. That was wrong. These are eukarya. This is kingdom plantae and kingdom animalia. Okay, cool. Another thing that we use often in biology is a phylogenetic tree. Phylogenetic trees just help us to kind of track how things have evolved over time. You have a question?
Yeah, archaea, because I know bacteria and eukaryotes. What's archaea? Like,
Archaea is basically any bacteria. It's usually bacteria-like. It's anything that you find like the extremophiles. So like in that hot spring, anything that could survive in that hot spring would be an archaea. Anything that can survive in like a ridiculously acidic environment or something that could survive in a very salty environment, things that are not within the general this feels like it should be livable, will fall into the category of archaea because it is likely a small for lack of a better word right now, being that has been on this planet long before we could even think about it and will probably be here long before we could even fathom its demise, right? So those things that have survived millennia, eons of being on this planet are going to be things that fall into that category. Okay. And then, yeah, a phylogenetic tree just allows us to kind of see how things have evolved over time, where they evolved together, where things have branched off. So, probably once upon a time, we all had a common ancestor. We, being all the bacteria, the archaea, the eukarya, had a common ancestor. And then over time, as we've evolved, we've branched off. Okay. Branches of biology, there's a lot. Like I said, you see that ology. Ology just means study of. Environmental biology studies the environment and how it interacts with and how people interact with things around it. That's a little bit more sociobiology. Sociobiology talks about kind of how animals will interact within their own communities, things like that. Parasitology, study of parasites. Paleontology, dinosaur bones. Embryology, the study of development, so on and so forth. The only one that doesn't have an ology to it is genetics, but it is the study of our genes, our DNA, all of the stuff that goes on in that. There's a whole bunch of different branches of biology, and all of them are very interesting. Me personally, I'm a cell biology girly, I'm an anatomy and physio girly, and I'm a biotech girly through and through. Okay? I have a friend who's an entomologist, whose husband actually is an entomologist, and entomologists study bugs. He's an interesting dude. More branches in biology. The thing with biology is that any aspect of science that you could get into, you can make a biological component of it as well. So, computer science, you could look at how humans do XYZ with computers and blah 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 blah. There's a niche for that too. Okay. Lots of different careers in biology. These guys are paleontologists. Paleontologists. I can't spell. Don't at me. Ross Geller from Friends, that's your boy. That's his job. Forensic science, DNA extraction. You guys are going to be doing DNA extraction later in the semester, and all kinds of stuff. Great. Okay. So, processes of science. We got learning objectives. We are going to identify the shared characteristics of the natural sciences, understand the processes of scientific inquiry, compare inductive versus deductive reasoning, and then describe the goals of basic science and applied science. You guys need a break? Yeah, let's take a little break. Let's do this. What is science? Science is just a specific way of learning and getting to know our world. It is a way for us to try to understand the truth of what it is that we see and experience in our daily lives. How do we conduct science? Empirically and based on observations and repeatable tests. That's why something like accurate measurements is something that's so important, because you have to be able to repeat and have other people do the same experiment and get the same result, right? So some of the methods of science include careful observation, record keeping. You have no idea how important record keeping is until someone before you has not kept good records. Logical and mathematic reasoning. Experimentation. And peer review. Your work has to be able to hold up to scrutiny by others in the community. Okay. This is just some images of algae. This is the one under microscope. And this is where you would find it in nature. Group of E. coli bacteria. E. coli is something that exists in our digestive system. You have E. coli in your body right now. There is just different strains of E. coli. Some of them are helpful, some of them are harmful. So when you hear things like Chipotle has E. coli in their lettuce, I think is what it was, right? That is a harmful strain of E. coli that would wreak havoc on your digestive system versus the good E. coli that functions in there already. Okay. Natural sciences, we kind of break these into two categories: life sciences and physical sciences. Life sciences study living things. They include like studies like biology. That's not how you spell that. Biology, anatomy. That's a different kind of science, but I'll take psychology, but I'm gonna put a hard kinda on that one, right? Because it is the study of living things, but it's kind of the study of how living things think and how they process, and that's a little. I hate the term soft science, but because it's not. Psychology's hard, bro. People are wild. It's true. Trying to anticipate what other people are thinking is insanely difficult. But not necessarily a life science, but it's in the vein. Okay, anyways, so, and then a physical science studies non-living matter. And that's going to be more of your things like astronomy, physics, physics, chemistry, guys, I can't spell today. Physics, chemistry are going to be more of your physical science type things.
Would viruses fall under life sciences or physical science?
That is a great question. The question was, would viruses fall under life sciences or physical sciences? That is a great question. Logical thinking that we tend to use in science and biology, and they are inductive reasoning versus deductive reasoning. Okay. Inductive reasoning is a form of logical thinking that uses related observations to arrive at a general conclusion. Inductive reasoning is what you guys did on Monday when you were trying to figure out where I grew up. You were using all of the related observations of my tone of voice, my accent, my name, all of that stuff, my favorite foods, to use all of those observations to create a general conclusion of where I may be from. That was inductive reasoning that you guys did. Okay? Deductive reasoning uses general principles or laws to predict a specific effect. For example, what would happen if I let go of this from up here? It's gonna fall, right? What laws or principles did you use to come to that conclusion? The law of gravity. We know that gravity exists. Gravity is actually a theory, but that's a different conversation. That gravity exists, and that when I have something that is up high and I let go of it, it will fall. That is deductive reasoning, using things that have already been relatively proven to come to a conclusion. You with me? Cool. The scientific method is a set of research methods with very defined steps. Oops, sorry. That include experimentation and observation. scientific method is just a guideline of how to conduct scientific research. Sir Bacon was the first one to document the scientific method, technically. Okay. Am I cool to move on? Sick. Great. So, scientific method, you will first make an observation. When I say make an observation, I just mean that you notice something going on in the world around you, right? And that observation, you see something going on. Seeing something going on. That seeing something going on will lead you to ask a question. Like, I see that there is a water bottle here. I wonder what is in this water bottle, right? You will then form a hypothesis. A hypothesis is just a fancy science way of asking that question. One of the ways that I learned to write hypotheses and to think about hypotheses, and sorry if you're on that side, it might be a little bit hard to see, is if my dependent variable, the thing that I can change, changes, then something will happen with my independent variable, the thing that I am looking at, the thing that I have no control over. Because of whatever reason, I think that that thing is happening. Because as I add heat to my sample, it will explode because heat does that. You get what I'm trying to say here? This is a very loose hypothesis. We'll work on some hypotheses later, okay? But that's generally what a hypothesis would be formed as. If changing variable changes, comma, then outcome of variable that I am looking at will happen because reasoning. Cool? That's hypothesis. That hypothesis allows you to make some predictions. Making predictions, I wouldn't necessarily say is a whole new step. It's just kind of the next logical part of making a hypothesis, because you don't exactly know what's going to happen. Your hypothesis is what you predict could happen. Okay? Then you would do an experiment. To test your hypothesis. After you've done the experiment, then you need to analyze the results. And from that analysis of your results, you will find out whether or not your hypothesis is supported or rejected. In science, we never say that our hypothesis was wrong. We say that it was rejected. Yeah, it's never wrong because you didn't know. How could you have known? You were doing an experiment to find out if your predictions were correct. So it's not a matter of right and wrong. It's my hypothesis, what I predicted would happen based on X, Y, Z and what I know is supported, or my hypothesis was rejected. What I thought would happen isn't exactly what happened. And then from there, you can go back and ask a new question, form a new hypothesis, and find a set of questions that will then be properly answered.
I guess a while ago I heard that
You have to report your results. And that's where that peer review comes in. Your experimentation, your methodology, all of it has to hold up to scrutiny by the academic community and experts in that field. So this is the scientific method. Observe, question, hypothesize, predict, experiment, analyze, conclude. It's great. It works so often and so well. That sounded sarcastic. It wasn't. A lot of the time in science, you get that your data was inconclusive. That happens all the time. A scientific theory. A theory is something that is generally accepted and thoroughly tested. Next. Big definition. A scientific theory is a thoroughly tested and confirmed explanation for a set of observations or phenomena. Basically, all that means is that we, as a scientific community, have done everything that we could possibly think of to test this thing, but I can't exactly prove it. I can't prove that it's real, but it explains everything else that goes on around here. Gravity is a theory. We can't exactly prove gravity. There isn't, like, you know how in geometry you did proofs long time ago? You can't exactly, there isn't really a proof for geometry, but it's the only thing that explains everything that gravity touches. Does that make sense? So theories are things that are heavily tested, thoroughly thought through, but don't have a definitive quote unquote proof to them. Okay? Like the theory of gravity, the theory of evolution, the theory of all kinds of stuff. Lots of theories in this world. All right? Basic science versus applied science. Basic science, or pure science, I don't like that definition either, is essentially science with an immediate goal. I want to test the liquid in this bottle to ensure that it is safe for consumption. That is a basic science. This bottle of water right now, right here, I need to test it to make sure that it's safe. Applied science uses science to solve bigger problems, real world problems, things that affect the global majority, like improving crop yield or figuring out how to save things that are being affected by climate change. Applied science deals more with the bigger, broader, grand scheme things. Basic science more so for the short term, I need to know if X does Z. Make sense? And then just a little example of how basic and applied science can work together. Don't worry about that. The Human Genome Project was a great example of how basic and applied science work together. The Human Genome Project was essentially trying to map the entire human genome. It's been done. We've done it. It's been done since like 2013. Sorry, no, 2003 is when we finished that project. And while the basic science was how do we map it, the applied science is how do we then use all of this information that we've mapped to deal with genetic diseases, things like sickle cell anemia, things like Tay-Sachs disease, Down syndrome, any type of genetic anomaly. We can now see how we can modify or change things to help ensure that these people's lives are better. So using that basic, I need to answer this question, how do we map the human genome, into how do we cure Tay-Sachs disease? Basic versus applied. When we report scientific work, because again, like I said, scrutiny by the community is a vital part of science. We use journals, peer-reviewed journals, and professional publications, things like the Journal of American Medical Association, that's a big one. They show the actual experiment, the procedures, the data, and all the conclusions that come with it, versus secondary articles, which are usually a little bit more educational, a little bit more easy for the general public to consume, that are more readily available and break down information into easier kind of chunks. I'll show you the difference between a scientific article versus a secondary article. Okay, cool. So that's the end of the chapter 1 little lecture.